Hi, I'm Ann Gaviola. Welcome to the Peak on Global, where we break down what is trending in the business world and what you need to know to stay ahead of the curve. Joining me now is Jay Rosenthal. He's from the Peak podcast. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, Jay, you might be the best person to get into this first story with because you're a cannabis insider. It is, in many ways, I think, a sign of the times. Canopy Growth is laying off a third of its workforce and shutting down its HQ One Hershey facility in Smiths Falls, Ontario. Canopy is one of the biggest names in Canadian weed. What does this tell you about the state of cannabis in this country?
It's very challenging, and my parents are so proud that I'm still called a cannabis insider all the way since high school. But I actually think it's not so surprising. Look, there was an exuberance around cannabis in 2017, 2018, pre-legalization, which led to lots of companies with Canopy in the front of it producing lots and lots of capacity to grow cannabis. Once legalization happened, now there's a glut of cannabis, and there still is, which led to dropping prices of cannabis, which may be good for consumers, but bad for companies like Canopy and other cultivators. So they're shifting gears. So it's not really a surprise. There's also heavy regulation, lots of taxation, and a really challenging environment that's overlaid on a really challenging economic factor. So it's not much of a surprise. And when you put all those things together, you see what happened yesterday. But it is, I would say, sad because at some point, or one point, Smith Falls was really the mecca of Canadian cannabis, and maybe cannabis around the world. With Canopy Growth, they were one of the largest cannabis companies in the world for a very, very long time. And so it is challenging and actually sad to see, but I think an indication of where the industry is right now in Canada.
Yeah, the cannabis industry, very important for Smiths Falls. And before that, it was, the chocolate industry that was a big one there. Now, I do remember, you mentioned this, the hype and all the hope around this sector leading up to and shortly after legalization. Both cannabis and for Cannabis 2.0, as it's known, that has everything to do with edibles and vape pens and topicals. And Canopy was in many ways for Cannabis 1.0 seen as the first mover. A big problem, as you mentioned, stiff competition, this coming from the illicit market, both black and gray, and an inability for many players in the industry to pivot to things like premium products. Now, the data shows a big opportunity there is older customers who are willing to pay a lot more for a premium product, and they don't want to get it from illicit sources. What are your thoughts, Jay?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the data suggests that older consumers will buy premium products, but they're not going to buy it in the same way that the sort of 20% of consumers are buying 80% of the product, right? There's a pretty classic 20% of the consumers buying most of the, vast majority of the product. So the industry is still working itself out, and it's relatively new. I know it seems like old hat to be talking about sort of 2017, 2018, but I think the industry is going through a pretty substantial right sizing between how much cannabis is produced, how many premium products, how many sort of finished products, beverages, edibles, that sort of thing. And we're just working it out. Like, what is the right number of stores to service the market in Ontario, in BC, sort of the two biggest markets. So we're still in this sort of shakeout phase, but I still think we're going to see sort of 20% of the product being bought by 80% of the product being 20% of the people, which is a, pretty classic breakdown, and sort of servicing that market is what the industry is trying to figure out.
Yeah, a good reminder there that it is in many ways still early days, and we're still waiting to see what the rest of the world has in store for the cannabis industry. It is moving a little bit slower than probably many people had anticipated. Let's segue into the second topic, and it has to do with the movie theater business. They're having a tough time getting older viewers to return to the cinema experience. Part of the problem is that content on streaming platforms is so good. I think at this point in time, TV shows are better than movies 9 times out of 10. The other piece of it is that our living rooms and our viewing devices have gotten a lot better. It's a lot more comfortable to watch at home than it ever has been. Thoughts, Jay? And do you and your family shell out to go to the movies?
We shell out to go to the movies, and we shell out for lots of streaming services, and we just shelled out for a massive 55-inch TV as well with sound. So we're getting it sort of both coming and going, or going and staying at home as well. But it is a very expensive night out. I just looked at what it would cost to go see the 20th anniversary of Titanic downtown in Toronto, and the tickets alone were like over $70 for the four of us, plus popcorn and concessions and peanut M&Ms, which we always put in the popcorn. So it is an expensive night out. And I, a lot of the movies that are in the theater now are sort of blockbusters because that's what studios want to put out, because that's what shows best in a theater. While some of the things that are, let's say, more specific to some specific audiences are on streaming. So I think obviously we're figuring out how we're going to watch sort of big box hits, but so are the studios, and we've seen it in Bob Iger retaking over Disney and other platforms as well. So it is another industry where we talked about cannabis, another industry that's trying to figure out how people are going to consume the product, and the product in this case is movies.
How did 2 decades go by since I saw Titanic in theaters? That blows my mind. I personally think there's a big opportunity for big cinema to do a better job of courting women viewers. I love a good superhero movie, sure, but I'd like to see more complex female characters with interesting plot lines, strong, diverse women leads, and not just supporting characters, but that is a whole other ball of yarn. Jay, you mentioned you and the kids. You have noticed how expensive a movie night out is when you factor in those meals, those snacks, those beverages. I was looking at Cineplex's Q4 results. There were some bright spots in there. Avatar and Black Panther Wakanda Forever, absolute standouts. Another plus is revenue per person at the concession. It reached a new record of nearly $9 per patron. And I bet that number could be even higher if you layered kind of a responsible cannabis experience in there too.
It does. You want to get as many concessions as possible. Actually, $9, that seems like we're getting out with a steal, $9 per person on the concession stand.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like the people that are going to theater want to see a specific kind of movie and are willing to shell out for those tickets, but also everything else that's in the theater. So they are going for not only to see it on the screen, but also for the experience of actually going. You talked about Wakanda Forever. We went as a family to see that in the theater, and we just watched it back again at home. So in that case, like Disney is getting us, again, going to the theater and back at home and streaming. So, I think it is, again, an industry shaking itself out, but it is good to see those concession numbers up because that is a big number and a big part of where they reach their profit on the Cineplex side for sure.
So your family is big double dippers, I guess. We can call it that. I think you guys are the exception, though, and not really the rule. Let's switch to the third topic. Another week, another bunch of AI headlines. A juicy one comes from the folks over at Alphabet who are hard at work developing Bard, which is Google's answer to ChatGPT. It gave a remarkably wrong answer in a live demo this week, and that sent shares of Alphabet plunging. That demo was basically the first ad for Bard, or in many cases, the public's first introduction to the chatbot. And I'm going to share a hot take here, Jay. This actually gives me comfort because I think we're very close to seeing demos go flawlessly. This all reminds me of those Boston Robotics demos that used to be hilarious because the robots would fall over. And then with time and dedication, those robots suddenly became very powerful, really savvy, not klutzy at all. What do you think, Jay?
I think the big flop from Bard was hard to witness, and it cost a market cap about $100 billion for Alphabet. So it wasn't just funny, but it did make, I think, search actually relevant again, and the conversation around search, where Google has been so dominant for so long. Now people are actually talking about Bing because they're incorporating ChatGPT into their search. And now Bing is less of a punchline and more sort of a leading edge of where search may be going. So while the demo was interesting to watch and sort of the repercussions around getting it a little bit wrong on opening day or on the first ad for it, it is really tech forward and like, what are we going to be talking about when it comes to search, which generates so much traffic for so many websites? If Google's whole business model is now sort of upended or will be soon, what does that mean for search? What does that mean for Bing? And what does that mean for Microsoft, Google, and sort of that ever never-ending battle? I think it really is interesting to see. And again, it made Bing less of a punchline and more of a frontline or a headline this week, which I think is always interesting to watch.
It's such an interesting point in time. It's like we combined search engines with Ask Jeeves. Do you remember that from way back in the day?
Oh, I do. I'm old enough to remember when I was asking Jeeves a lot, although it's hard to say like Ask Bing or Bing it up or, look it up on Bing. I mean, all those things are sort of, you plug in Google there, but, even the New York Times got in on the fun and saying that Bing is now relevant in the conversation, made search interesting again.
For the first time in a long time. I really like Bing it up. Go Bing it up. That's kind of catchy. Thank you so much for your time and your insight, Jay.
Thank you.
You can get all your daily business news with the Peak Daily Podcast. It is available for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you find your favorite podcasts.